6 years ago, my sister stole my millionaire fiancé, the man I was days away from marrying. At our mother's funeral, she walked in beside him, flashing her diamond ring and whispering, "Still alone at 38? I took everything from you." I didn't argue, I didn't react. I just smiled. Then I turned to her and said, "Have you met my husband yet?" When I called him over, her face drained of color before he even spoke. Because the man standing beside me was someone she never expected to see. My name is Rebecca Wilson, and at 38 years old, I found myself standing at my mother's funeral, dreading the moment my sister Stephanie would arrive. 6 years had passed since she stole Nathan, my millionaire fiancé, the man I was planning to spend my life with, and I hadn't seen either of them since. When they finally walked in, Stephanie was flashing her diamond ring with a smug smile, but I felt a calm I never expected. She had no idea who was waiting to meet her or how her face would turn white as a sheet when she saw the man I had married. Before I tell you about that moment, let me share how this journey began. My mother, Eleanor, was always the glue that held our family together. Growing up in a modest suburban home outside Boston, she was the one who taught me about strength and dignity. We shared a special bond that only deepened as I grew older. Even after I moved into my own apartment in downtown Boston and built my career as a marketing executive, I called her almost every day. She was my confidant, my advisor, and my biggest cheerleader. When she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 8 months ago, I felt my world crumbling. Despite the aggressive treatments, we knew time was limited. Mother faced her diagnosis with remarkable grace, more concerned about her family's welfare than her own suffering. Her final weeks were peaceful, surrounded by loved ones in the home where she had raised us. She slipped away holding my hand, having made me promise to find peace in my life. 6 years earlier, when I was 32, my life had seemed perfect on paper. I had the career, the friends, and the nice apartment, but something was missing. I worked 60-hour weeks and dated occasionally, but nothing serious ever stuck. Then I met Nathan Reynolds at a charity gala through my college friend Allison. Nathan was charismatic, with perfect teeth and a confidence that filled the room. A self-made tech millionaire at 36, he had the kind of success story magazines love to feature. Our connection was immediate. We shared a love for art, travel, and ambitious goals. After our first date at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the harbor, I called my mother and told her I had met someone special. Our relationship progressed quickly. Weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, box seats at symphony performances, and intimate dinners became our routine. Nathan was attentive and generous, always bringing thoughtful gifts and planning elaborate dates. After 18 months together, during a private dinner on a yacht in Boston Harbor, Nathan proposed with a 5-carat diamond ring. I said yes without hesitation. My parents were thrilled, especially my mother, who immediately began envisioning the perfect wedding. Nathan had the resources to make any wedding dream come true, and Eleanor insisted we shouldn't hold back. Then there was my younger sister, Stephanie, only 2 years younger than me. We had a complicated relationship growing up. As children, we were close despite the constant competition, but Stephanie always wanted what I had, from toys to friends to attention. If I achieved something, she had to match or exceed it. Mother always tried to keep the peace, giving each of us special time and attention. Despite our history, I chose Stephanie as my maid of honor. Mother said it would bring us closer, and I wanted to believe that as adults, we had moved beyond childhood jealousy. When I introduced Stephanie to Nathan at a family dinner, she complimented him excessively. I noticed her touching his arm while laughing at his jokes, but I dismissed it as Stephanie being her usual charming self. We held our engagement party at my parents' colonial-style home. Stephanie helped Mother with decorations, hanging fairy lights across the backyard and arranging flowers. Throughout the evening, I caught Stephanie watching Nathan across the room, but when our eyes met, she quickly smiled and raised her glass in my direction. Later that night, as guests were leaving, Mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Rebecca, dear, I notice Stephanie seems quite taken with Nathan," she said carefully, while arranging leftover appetizers. "She is just being friendly, Mom," I replied, washing champagne flutes in the sink. "Besides, she is dating that pharmaceutical rep, Brian." Mother nodded, but she didn't seem convinced. Just be careful, honey. You know how your sister can get when you have something she admires. I kissed her cheek and assured her everything was fine. We're adults now, Mom. Stephanie is happy for me, I am sure of it. How wrong I was. How painfully, devastatingly wrong. 3 months before our wedding, I began noticing subtle changes in Nathan. He started working later, often answering texts at odd hours with the excuse of international clients. Our usual Friday date nights were frequently rescheduled due to emergency meetings. When we were together, he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly and offering only partial attention to our conversations. More concerning was how he began criticizing things he once loved about me. My laugh was suddenly too loud in public. My favorite blue dress that he previously adored now made me look washed out. Even my habit of reading before bed, which he had found endearing, became annoying because of the light keeping him awake. Meanwhile, Stephanie started calling more frequently, always with questions about wedding details. I just want everything to be perfect for my big sister, she would say. Though Mother was handling most of the planning, Stephanie volunteered to help with vendor meetings I couldn't attend due to work. One Thursday evening, Nathan and I had dinner at an upscale Italian restaurant. He barely made eye contact, responding to my stories with one-word answers. When his phone buzzed for the 5th time, I reached my limit. Is there something more important happening elsewhere? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Sorry, just work stuff, he muttered, putting his phone face down. Later that week, I noticed an unfamiliar perfume on Nathan's collar while doing laundry. It was floral and heavy, nothing like the subtle scent I wore. When confronted, Nathan explained he had been in meetings all day with a potential investor, Rebecca Mills, who wore overpowering perfume and had hugged him goodbye. The explanation seemed plausible, and I wanted to believe him. I called my friend Allison to express my concerns the next morning. Every relationship gets jittery before the wedding, Allison reassured me. Parker and I fought constantly the month before ours, and now we have been married 5 years. But the knot in my stomach wouldn't dissolve. Mother noticed my anxiety during our weekly lunch. You seem distracted, sweetheart, she said, reaching across the table. Wedding stress or something else? I forced a smile and told her everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. I started making more effort, thinking perhaps I had been taking Nathan for granted. I booked a spa day, bought new lingerie, and tried cooking his favorite meals. The more I tried, the more distant he became. Then came the cake tasting appointment Nathan had been looking forward to for weeks. That morning, he called, claiming an unexpected meeting with investors. Stephanie can go with you, he suggested. She knows my preferences anyway. When I hung up, I felt sick. How did my sister know my fiancé's cake preferences better than I did? Still, I accepted her offer to join me. The next day, while cleaning Nathan's car before a dinner party, I found an earring wedged between the passenger seat and the center console. It was a dangling silver earring with a tiny sapphire that I immediately recognized as Stephanie's. My sister had worn those earrings to my engagement party, a gift from our grandmother. When I showed Nathan the earring that evening, his face remained perfectly composed. Oh, your sister must have dropped it when I gave her a ride to the florist last week, he said smoothly. She mentioned losing an earring. You never told me you drove Stephanie to the florist, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Didn't I? It must have slipped my mind, he replied. When I called Stephanie, her explanation matched his perfectly. Too perfectly. Oh, thank goodness, I've been looking everywhere for that, she said. Nathan was kind enough to drive me since my car was in the shop. That night, I couldn't sleep. Had they rehearsed their story? Was I being paranoid? My weight began dropping from stress and dark circles formed under my eyes. I started seeing a therapist without telling Nathan. 3 weeks before the wedding, Nathan suggested we postpone. I'm worried about you, Rebecca. You're not yourself lately. Maybe we're rushing things. I broke down, begging him to tell me what was wrong, what I had done, and how I could fix it. He held me, assuring me everything was fine, but his eyes were vacant. That night, I woke at 3 a.m. to find Nathan's side of the bed empty. From the hallway, I heard his hushed voice coming from the guest bedroom. Not now, she will hear us. I know. Soon, I promise. The next day, I decided to surprise Nathan at his office with lunch. My father, Thomas, called as I was leaving my apartment. Rebecca, are you eating properly? Your mother says you have lost too much weight. We are concerned. I told him I was fine and that I was actually bringing Nathan lunch right then. Good, he said. That boy better be treating my daughter like a queen. If only he knew. The security guard at Nathan's building recognized me and waved me through. On the elevator ride to the 12th floor, I checked my reflection, trying to smooth the worry lines on my face. When I reached the reception area, Nathan's secretary, Margot, looked up with wide, surprised eyes. Rebecca, we weren't expecting you today. Her gaze darted to Nathan's closed office door. Nathan is in a meeting right now. That's okay, I said, lifting the lunch bag. I can wait. Margot stood quickly, blocking my path. Actually, he specifically asked not to be disturbed. Something in her nervous manner triggered my suspicions. Is he alone in there, Margot? Her hesitation told me everything. Before she could respond, I walked past her and pushed open Nathan's office door. The scene burned into my memory forever. Nathan was leaning against his desk, his hands on my sister's waist, and her arms were wrapped around his neck. Their lips were locked in a passionate kiss. Neither noticed me at first, giving me several excruciating seconds to absorb every detail. Stephanie's skirt was pushed up, Nathan's tie was loosened, and there was a familiarity in their embrace that spoke of countless similar moments. When the door clicked shut behind me, they sprang apart. 3 faces frozen in shock. Rebecca, Nathan recovered first, straightening his tie. This isn't what it looks like. Stephanie didn't even attempt such a transparent lie. Instead, she lifted her chin defiantly. We didn't plan this. It just happened. The calm that washed over me was surprising. How long? I asked. Nathan glanced at Stephanie, then back to me. Rebecca, let's discuss this privately. How long? My voice remained steady. For months, Stephanie answered. Since the engagement party. For months. Nearly half our engagement. While I had been selecting wedding invitations and choosing floral arrangements, they had been betraying me. Nathan moved behind his desk, distancing himself physically as if preparing for a business negotiation. I didn't mean for this to happen, Rebecca. Sometimes feelings change. I was going to tell you after. After what? After the wedding? After our honeymoon? I was trying to find the right time, he said, with that practiced smoothness he used for difficult clients. The lunch bag dropped from my hand. I trusted you, both of you. Stephanie at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. It just happened, Becca. We tried to fight it. Don't call me Becca, I snapped. The childhood nickname felt like another violation. Nothing just happens for 4 months. You made choices. Every secret call, every lie, every time you looked me in the eye. Knowing what you were doing. Nathan pressed the intercom button and asked Margot to come in. Please escort Rebecca out. She is upset. I am escorting myself out, I said, my dignity somehow intact despite feeling shattered inside. You deserve each other. In the elevator, the tears finally came. By the time I reached my car, I was struggling to breathe between sobs. The drive home remains a blur. I only remember calling my mother from my apartment, curled on the bathroom floor, unable to form sentences. Mother and father arrived within the hour, using their emergency key. Mother held me while I told them everything. Father paced the living room, his face growing redder with each detail. I will kill him, he muttered. Both of them. Thomas, your blood pressure, Mother warned, though her own face showed equal fury. The next days passed in a haze of pain. Mother helped me call vendors to cancel arrangements, while Father handled the finances. When I returned the engagement ring to Nathan's apartment, I left it with the doorman because I couldn't bear to see him. I found Stephanie had already moved her things in. Most of her clothes were there, and family photos were arranged on shelves that once held mine. Nathan's email about dividing our shared assets was coldly efficient, mentioning that Stephanie had helped him catalog my remaining belongings. The betrayal ran deeper than I initially realized. Through mutual friends, I learned they had been meeting secretly whenever I worked late or traveled for business. Stephanie had pursued him deliberately, finding excuses to see him alone and sending texts and photos when I wasn't around. The scandal spread quickly through our social circle. Some friends sided with me, others with Nathan, citing his influence. Several admitted they had noticed flirtation between them but hadn't wanted to get involved. Their cowardice stung almost as much as the betrayal. Mother became my lifeline. She brought food when I couldn't eat, listened to my rants, and stayed overnight when the loneliness became unbearable. She tried repeatedly to mediate, inviting us both to family dinners that inevitably ended in intense silence or bitter arguments. During one such dinner, Stephanie snapped after I refused to pass her the salt. "You always got everything first, Rebecca. The grades, the job, the apartment. For once, I got something before you did." "My fiancé wasn't a prize to be won," I replied, my voice shaking. "He was the man I loved and trusted." Mother put her fork down. "Stephanie Marie Thompson, apologize to your sister right now." "For what? Being honest? Nathan chose me. He loves me now." I stood up, my napkin thrown onto my plate. "I can't do this anymore. Mom, I'm sorry." It was the last family dinner I attended with Stephanie present. Father's heart problems worsened from the stress of his daughter's feud, requiring medication adjustments. Mother aged years and months, the lines around her eyes deepening as she tried to hold her family together. 6 months after discovering the betrayal, I hit rock bottom. My therapist diagnosed me with depression. My work suffered as I struggled to focus, eventually losing a major client after a disastrous presentation where I broke down crying. My boss suggested a leave of absence, but I knew staying in Boston, where memories lurked around every corner, would only prolong my suffering. When a marketing director position opened in our Chicago branch, I applied immediately. The interview went surprisingly well, my desperation for change perhaps reading as enthusiasm. 2 weeks later, I received the offer. Mother helped me pack my apartment, carefully wrapping photos in tissue paper. As we sorted through my belongings, she broached the subject that hung between us. "Will you ever consider forgiving Stephanie?" she asked, sealing a box. I continued folding sweaters without looking up. "I don't know, Mom. Not now. Maybe not ever." "Forgiveness isn't about them deserving it," she said softly. "It's about freeing yourself." I am freeing myself. I am moving to Chicago. Mother sat beside me on the bed, taking my hands in hers. "Running away isn't the same as healing, sweetheart." Tears filled my eyes. "I need space to even begin to heal. Can you understand that?" She nodded, pulling me into a tight hug. "Promise you will call. Promise you won't shut us out completely." "I promise." Saying goodbye to my parents was harder than I anticipated. Father held me longer than usual, his voice gruff with emotion as he told me how proud he was. "Remember who you are, Rebecca. You are a Wilson. We don't break. You show them, kiddo," my father said, his voice thick with a rough, protective love. "Build a life so good they will choke on their regret." Those words stayed with me as I boarded my flight, leaving the wreckage of my old life behind. My first few weeks in Chicago were a blur of cold winds and hollow silences. Loneliness and doubt followed me into my studio apartment, a space that felt sterile and unfamiliar compared to the home I had planned to share with Nathan. To avoid the crushing quiet of empty rooms, I buried myself in work, staying late at the office and eating takeout at my desk before falling into bed, exhausted but unable to truly rest. Then came the news that twisted the knife deeper into my heart. Mother called one Sunday morning, her voice unusually cautious and strained. "Rebecca, I feel you should hear this from me rather than seeing it on social media. Stephanie and Nathan got married yesterday." They had held a small civil ceremony, but Nathan's extensive business connections ensured it was featured prominently in the society pages of Boston Magazine. I couldn't stop myself from looking. The accompanying photo showed them beaming outside the courthouse, Stephanie wearing a simple white dress, my former engagement ring flashing mockingly on her finger. That night was my absolute lowest point. I drank an entire bottle of wine alone, scrolling through old photos of Nathan and me, crying until my eyes swelled shut. I called in sick the next morning, physically and emotionally unable to face the world. However, something shifted during those dark hours of isolation. As the morning light began to filter through my blinds, I reached a turning point. I decided this would be the last day I ever gave them power over my happiness. I deleted every photo of Nathan from my phone, blocked both him and Stephanie on every social media platform, and took a long shower, imagining my pain finally washing away down the drain. At work, I threw myself into my projects with a renewed, sharp focus. My boss quickly noticed the change, assigning me to more significant, high-stakes clients. I developed a reputation for creativity and tireless dedication, earning the respect of my colleagues. My first real friend in the city was Madison Reynolds, our HR director. She invited me to her book club, and through her, I slowly began building a social circle. Madison frequently tried to set me up on dates, but I declined every offer. The thought of being romantically vulnerable again was still terrifying. For months into my new life, I was sent to a technology conference in San Francisco to represent our company. On the second evening, I attended a business dinner where I was seated next to Zachary Foster, a tech investor who had recently relocated from Seattle. Zachary was different from Nathan in every way. Where Nathan had been flashy and performative, Zachary was understated and genuine. He had a quiet confidence and a way of asking thoughtful questions that drew people in without him ever needing to demand attention. When he spoke about his work, his passion was evident, yet never boastful. He asked for my card after dinner, and I gave it to him without any expectations. To my surprise, he emailed the next morning, asking if I would like to continue our conversation about marketing trends over coffee. Over the next 3 months, we maintained professional contact, but Madison noticed our frequent lunches and raised an eyebrow. He likes you, Rebecca, and not just for your marketing insights. I insisted we were just colleagues, but she laughed, saying colleagues don't look at each other the way he looks at you. Eventually, Zachary asked me to a dinner that had nothing to do with work. I panicked, nearly canceling twice before forcing myself to go. 20 minutes into the date, while we were discussing our favorite books, I had a full-blown panic attack. My hands shook, my breathing hitched, and tears welled in my eyes. Instead of being embarrassed, Zachary moved to sit beside me, speaking calmly and steadily until my breathing normalized. He drove me home without any pressure. The next day, flowers arrived at my office with a simple note: "No pressure, no expectations. Just hoping you are feeling better." That evening, I called him and bared my soul about Nathan and Stephanie. He listened without interruption, then shared his own story of heartbreak. His ex-wife had left him for his business partner, taking half of their company in the divorce. "Broken trust leaves scars," he said softly. "Anyone worth your time will understand that healing isn't a straight line." Over the following months, we built a foundation of friendship first. Zachary never pushed for more than I was ready to give. For our 5th date, he cooked dinner at his apartment to avoid the crowds that might trigger my anxiety. For the first time since the betrayal, I began to believe that trust might actually be possible again. 1 year after moving, I barely recognized my own life. I had been promoted to senior marketing director, and I had fallen deeply in love with Zachary. Unlike Nathan's flashy courtship, Zachary's love was shown in consistent, thoughtful ways. He remembered the small things, like how I preferred oat milk or which podcasts I followed. In June, Zachary took me to the Chicago Botanic Garden. Beneath a trellis covered in climbing roses, he took my hands. "This past year, knowing you has been the greatest gift of my life," he said. When he knelt and produced a ring box, panic flashed briefly, ghosts of Nathan's proposal trying to haunt the moment. But looking into Zachary's eyes, I saw only sincerity. "I am not asking for an answer today," he said. "I just want you to know that whenever you are ready, I will be here." Tears filled my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. "I am ready now." The ring was a simple, elegant emerald, nothing like the ostentatious diamond Nathan had used to buy my affection. We planned a small wedding of 30 guests. At my mother's urging, I sent Stephanie an invitation as a gesture of peace. Her response was brief and cold, stating they had prior commitments. Our wedding was joyful. My father walked me down the aisle, whispering that he hadn't seen me this happy in years. We built a beautiful life together, eventually buying and renovating a brownstone. But then, the devastating news of my mother's cancer diagnosis brought me back to Boston. I took a leave from work to care for her, and Zachary was my rock, flying in every weekend to support me and my increasingly frail father. In her final weeks, Mother pleaded with me to find peace with Stephanie. "Life is too short for such distance between sisters," she whispered. I promised her I would try, wanting only for her to pass in peace. She slipped away 3 days later. I called Stephanie immediately. "Mom is gone," I said. "I will be there in an hour," she replied, her voice breaking. The morning of the funeral was gray and drizzly. I stood before the mirror in my childhood bedroom, Zachary standing right behind me. "Whatever happens, I am right beside you," he promised. At the funeral home, as I guided my stooped, grieving father to the front row, a murmur rippled through the room. I turned to see Stephanie and Nathan walking in. Stephanie was draped in expensive black, her massive diamond rings catching the light. Nathan looked uncomfortable in his tailored suit, his arm around her waist. They made their way forward, and as they reached the front, the years of silence and pain finally came to a head. Stephanie reached out to embrace our father, who returned the gesture with a visible, pained stiffness. Nathan followed, offering a handshake that received only a curt, silent nod. When Stephanie turned to me, her expression was a mask I couldn't quite decipher. "It has been a long time," she said. I simply replied that it had, not trusting myself to say more. Nathan muttered a brief, awkward apology for my loss. Zachary had stepped away to speak with the funeral director, leaving me momentarily exposed. Stephanie seized the chance, gesturing toward a private side room. Wanting to avoid a scene in the middle of our mother's service, I followed her. Inside, she assessed me critically, remarking that I looked thin. "Grief does that," I replied flatly. She began twisting her massive ring, boasting about a new 8-bedroom summer house on Cape Cod they had just purchased. She spoke of private beaches and plans for a nursery as Nathan's company acquired new startups. "I just thought you might want to know how well we are doing," she said with a sharp, triumphant smile. "Poor you, still alone at 38. I got the man, the money, and the mansion. 6 years ago, that would have crushed me. Now, it just felt pathetic." I smiled genuinely and asked if she had met my husband yet. Her face faltered. "Husband?" I called Zachary into the room. As he entered, Nathan appeared behind him, and the color instantly drained from Nathan's face. "Foster," he stammered. "Reynolds," Zachary replied, his tone professional but icy. He pointedly mentioned a major acquisition years ago where Zachary's client had won and Nathan's had lost. Nathan swallowed hard, realizing we had been married for 2 years. Zachary Foster, of Foster Investments, was a name Nathan clearly feared and envied. The service was interrupted when our father clutched his chest in pain. We rushed him to a private room where a doctor confirmed it was overwhelming stress rather than a heart attack. In those 20 minutes of uncertainty, a fragile truce formed. Stephanie showed genuine concern, her bravado vanishing as we sat united by fear for our father. The funeral proceeded, and I delivered a eulogy for Mother's strength. When Stephanie stood to speak, she broke down in tears. Without thinking, I moved to her side and placed a hand on her back, whispering for her to take her time. At the reception, the truth began to leak through the cracks. I overheard business associates whispering about Nathan's struggling company and the debt behind their lifestyle. The next day, after Zachary flew back to Chicago for a board meeting, I stayed to help Father. In Mother's bedside drawer, I found her journal. Her final entry expressed her greatest regret, leaving while her daughters were still estranged. The doorbell rang, and I found Stephanie standing on the porch alone. Over coffee, she finally broke. She confessed that her life was a miserable facade. Nathan had become controlling and critical. Their wealth was an illusion built on mounting debt, and he monitored her every move. "I'm miserable, Rebecca," she sobbed. "I destroyed our family for a mirage." She told me she was secretly consulting a lawyer to leave him, even though a prenup meant she would walk away with nothing. Vindication didn't feel as good as I expected. Instead, I felt a strange compassion. We spent hours sorting through Mother's things, sharing memories of the notes she used to leave in our lunchboxes. It wasn't instant forgiveness, but it was a beginning. 6 months later, back in Chicago, I discovered I was finally pregnant. My life with Zachary was built on a foundation of true partnership and respect. Mother was right. Forgiveness was for me, not them. Losing Nathan hadn't been the end of my world. It had been the beginning of a far better one. The hardest chapters of my life had finally directed me toward my truest path, proving that pain never gets the final word.